Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be for a very special collab review. Before we get into what we're going to be talking about, we are going to talk about the fifth season. Of course, we are going to be talking about the fifth season of Bojack Horseman. This is, one of my favorite shows on TV right now, and since a lot really did go down in this season, is going to be a spoiler review. However, unlike the other Bojack reviews I've done, I am not alone here. I am here with this little shit that wanted this to be a collab review for some reason. He is a fish. He is not human, and that is why he is not turning on his camera. He has just become so engrossed in the world of Bojack Horseman that he turned into one of them. He is part of Hollywood now, and he is no longer a human being. So here he is. Auburn Wanderer.
Yes, I am now a fish, just so people know. And yeah, so this is going to be an exciting review. Thanks for having me on, Kevin. And yeah, this is quite a show, so I wanted to talk about it finally on YouTube. And I also just wanted to say that I finished the season before Kevin, and I'm very proud of that. So yeah, should be fun.
All right. So before we get into the season, everything, just for context, just let people know your experience with Bojack Horseman, how you feel about it as a TV show, what you like, what you dislike, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I knew about the show when it was announced. Like, I saw the trailer for the first season, like, long ago at this point, like 2014. And I thought it looked amazing. And I was like, oh, this looks like a show that I might watch. I don't really watch TV, so I was like, I might watch the show. So fast forward to that next year when season 2 came out, Kevin was talking about how amazing, season 2 was. And I was like, you know what, I'll watch this show. So I binge watched the first 2 seasons in like a week, and I thought it was incredible. I really like season 1, and then season 2 is amazing. And then, the third season came out. Obviously, I watched that when that came out. I loved that season, of course. And then when season 4 came out, I didn't watch it until like February of this year because
fake fan.
Because it came out the same day as It, which was my most anticipated.
Fake fan.
Was my most anticipated movie of all time. A film of all time. I gotta be pretentious. A film of all time. So I was like, oh man, I gotta focus on It. So I focused on it for like that whole weekend and shit. So like, I basically just honestly completely forgot about Bojack Horseman, and just kind of like school was kind of hectic at that time. So I basically just forgot about it. So I just never ended up watching it. I finally watched it, and I thought it was a really damn good season. It's a really good season. And then, this season, I watched it when it came out on Friday. I watched the whole thing, and now we're going to talk about how we felt.
Obviously, before we get to it, I'm going to talk about the initial plot for the season. Now, if you haven't watched season 4, this is going to contain spoilers, and it's going to contain spoilers for the entire season overall, just because so much happens in this season. I just kind of feel like we have to do a spoiler review just so we can kind of talk about everything that really went down. But of course, the initial plot of the season, as we know in season 4, Bojack is now on this TV show called Filbert. It's basically him trying to, resurrect his career and things like that. He's hoping to, turn things around. He's on good terms with Hollyhock, who is now his sister, and basically, things seem to be going well. But then after some previous information leaks out, things go really downhill for Bojack, and that's really all we're going to say. Now, the first half of this review is going to be like a regular review, and then we'll get into the spoilers. So I'll just say it right now, going in season 5, I was really excited. This is one of my favorite shows on Netflix. It probably is my favorite show that Netflix has right now. I think it's just such a very introspective look at, Hollywood and the various sort of, washed up celebrities and things like that. And Bojack Horseman in particular has just done such an incredible job with getting us to simultaneously care, but also despise its main character. And I think they've done such a great job with that. And the way that season 4 ended, it seemed like Bojack was headed into a more positive direction, and we really didn't know where season 5 was going to go. They were pretty tight-lipped about it overall, and after watching the season, I can definitely tell why, because this is easily one of the best seasons yet. Season 5 is absolutely phenomenal. It's soul-crushing. it probably is the darkest this show has ever gotten, but also the most real this show has ever gotten. I think that really is why it is as amazing of a show as it truly is. There really is a lot of things to talk about, but before I get to all that, let's just turn back to Auburn so he can give his initial thoughts on this season.
This is my favorite season of the show. I went into the season basically not really knowing much. I watched the trailer like once, and I got what I got out of that. And so, I watched it basically before like the majority of people, do day, because, people are like on work on Friday, and, some people don't want to binge the whole fucking thing, that fast. So, I basically watched this whole season basically blind, and it blew me away. And I think that was for the benefit because, like Kevin said, this season is definitely the darkest season easily. So much like happens in this season that I truly wasn't expecting, and that's for the benefit because the show continues to challenge its characters and bringing them into new situations and makes them uncomfortable, and like the characters become more like nuanced and they're more like relatable in a sense. And even as the show goes on for 5 seasons, I'm still surprised that the show is as well written as it is.
Yeah, same.
And like to go more just off of your thing, you're talking about how it's like such a good portrayal of like, how like some washed up people in Hollywood. I think it's just more of like people who are just like confused in life. And it just so happens that Bojack Horseman is like, used to be a superstar. So it's like, it's just like going through like the motions at this point. And like, this is like, the worst that like Bojack has ever been. So seeing that season was really like, compelling because, he's an interesting character. And, a lot happens. But this is definitely my favorite season. It was the one where I was most engaged. I thought it was the really well written. I binged it really quickly. Like, I was never bored. Yeah, so let's just get into why.
All right. Now, obviously, talked about it, for 4 seasons now. Not really going to talk about the acting all that much. All the performances continue to dominate this entire show. The voice acting cast is probably the best it's ever been, particularly Will Arnett and Alison Brie, I think, give some of their strongest work in the entire series. We'll get more into that a little bit later, but seriously, it really is a crime that the Emmys don't have some sort of category for like best voice acting because best voice performance because Will Arnett would easily at least be up there. Like especially one episode in particular this season. It just makes me a little bit upset that there is no category like that because I truly do think he does some of his, maybe the best work I've ever seen from him in this season. But in terms of the new cast as well, I thought was phenomenal. These are probably maybe my favorite group of side characters to date. Stephanie Beatriz is so good as this character of Gina. This is Bojack's co-star in the show, Filbert, and her character is extremely interesting. We'll get to her character a little bit later, but she does such a great job at portraying someone who really is this up-and-coming star and really wants to be noticed and finally put her name out there. And you see that this is kind of like this lifelong dream of hers, and Beatriz just portrays this role with so much honesty and sincerity. Some of the best scenes, I think, in this season are just those two interacting, and I really did love that relationship overall. There's something really genuine and sweet about it, and that's really when it gets, that's really what ends up being so much more tragic about, which we'll get to a little bit later. But that relationship is fantastic. Rami Malek as well here is so good as the executive, not the director or the creator of the show, Filbert, who is basically just kind of a riff on every single visionary director out there that thinks that they're the shits and doesn't want anyone else to tell them otherwise. And he did such a great job. I didn't even realize it was Rami Malek at first, but he was so good here.
I didn't even know that was Rami Malek. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was. He did such a phenomenal job in this role, and I am very happy to see Rami Malek getting more work, of course. And then Han Chau is the only other person I really do want to talk about. Han Chau did a very good job as Mr. Peanut Butter's new love interest. I really liked her character in the show. I thought she definitely did a very good job here. Again, voice cast is fantastic. They're great. But now let's get to the season overall, because one of the things this season does so well is present you with a lot of familiarity. Because at this point, we know the characters. We know the characters. We know the setting. We know how the show is going to play out. And that's why the season starts off a little bit more hopeful than others. It starts off kind of lighthearted in a sense, where you're feeling like, okay, maybe everything's going to be okay. Maybe Bojack's actually going to be able to turn things around. Maybe this is actually going to go well for him. And when things start to get darker and crazier, it's that much more rewarding. And I think that the tones were just so well implemented this season. It's very fun at points, but like we said, this is the darkest season yet. It's not afraid to get into some truly just awful and truly just really hard to think about territory. And I think they did such a great job with that overall. The directing is just so good in the show. And I think they did such a great job with the tones. And in terms of the writing, I think it's the best it's ever been, honestly. I do still think season 3 is the best season overall. And we'll talk about why a little bit later. But the writing in the show is just so great because, like I said, the beginning of the season, you think everything's going to be fine. You get this false sense of hope. And we're kind of given this idea that, you know, Bojack's able to put things aside, but unfortunately, you know, things from his past just keep haunting him and he just can't seem to get away from it. And you see this season is really him trying to turn things around and finally accepting the fact that he really needs to change as a person. And that is something that, you know, whatever they need to do, it needs to change immediately. And I think it's just such a great arc for Bojack. And a lot of people have said that they're very much retconning his character because of where he ends up going. And I would highly disagree with that. I think Bojack is a very realistic portrayal of someone who is very damaged and someone who is very self-destructive, and that they're always going to revert back to that self-destructive behavior until they really try to do something about it. And Bojack really hasn't. He's kind of ignoring it this season. He's kind of just acting like everything's fine and that everything that happened in previous seasons didn't really happen. And you really do see how that starts to become a detriment to who Bojack really is and his sense of self and everyone around him, and how he kind of starts to become a danger to himself and others. And I do think it is one of the strongest arcs that Bojack has ever had. It's very unexpected the way it happens because, again, Season 4 gave us this sense of hope and clarity that everything's going to be all right, but we see this season that might not ever be possible, and I think they did such an incredible job with that. I know Caden definitely has a lot to say about that.
I disagree that that like at the beginning of the season you really feel hopeful. I don't, because like I feel like the first episode, like when it shows like him like having like the vodka and it has like how he can drink a day, yeah, like you can see that like he's like really like struggling with trying to change himself and get better.
Yeah, but at the same time, like there's that really great scene with that one like scene with the nudity and how he really doesn't want, and you know, he really doesn't want him to have to do that. And it doesn't really seasons ago. It's something that Bojack I think would have been okay with. I don't think he would have just, you know, he wouldn't have tried to push back as hard as he really did. And I think that's one of the things that shows that like he is genuinely starting to, you know, care more for people and things like that.
I mean, yeah, I mean to an extent, but like the reason he was uncomfortable doing it is because he makes a joke about like his dick size. I mean,
Mhm.
that was like it was like a joke there and stuff. But like I mean I get what you're trying to say, but like I had like the whole like season, like it builds up this like unnerving sense, and then like in episode 4 when like you know, something like really like big happens and stuff, and like you're like, oh shit, you know, the show really is you know, like going for it. And something like this season that happens is it feels like everything that's happened to Bojack in his life, it all comes full circle and just
Pretty much, yeah.
crashes on him at once. And like he's such like a damaged character now, and everything just like it just builds up, and it just like the climax is nuts, and then you know, like, you know, it all resolves in a way, like it begins to resolve in a way that I think is a great future for the show, but also like the character of Bojack. And you know, like constantly, like I say, I something that you like, you know, you touched up on, but like this is like one of like the best showings of like mental illness and stuff, because like it's very accurate in showing how like, you know, some people will deal with it, you know, like they go back to those destructive paths and they feel stuck, and they handle relationships about like it's just like it just happens. And I think that the show handles it in a very mature and respectful way. And this is definitely my favorite written season because I feel like all the characters are going through shit, and they're really like, obviously every season they do, but like this season really just feels like every character has a goal and they're trying to reach it. And you know, the thing that I find most compelling is, and just to, I guess, get into spoilers now because I thought this was gonna be a whole spoiler review, is that I love how at the end of the season it feels like everyone basically resolved their goals except for Bojack and Diane. And
Yeah.
that really like builds, I guess, like they're like, you know, like dynamic, because I think that's like the strongest relationship in the show. And that's something that's throughout the season as well. That's like my favorite part of the season. Like it shows how that relationship is like building up. But it's getting more destructive and stuff. But like they are the most two damaged characters in the show. And like that's why I think that they like kind of like click when, you know, when they're able to, you know. And yeah, and I mean, yeah, this show definitely it is really realistic and stuff, and I think that it really shows just how powerful animation can be, because there's still people out there that think animation is just for kids when it's not. It can be powerful like this. And yeah, so this is definitely the best written season. There's just so much going for it. It's so like compelling, and there's so much more substance to the characters. And yeah, and the one thing I'll definitely say is that I do feel like next season should be the last season, just because everything, like I said, it sort of comes like full circle this season. And you know, it could all just like, you know, be like the resolution, you know, next season. So, well, we'll have to see though. And yeah, definitely the directing is a very, very good, you know, like every episode kind of has its like own like feel to it. And like the style will like switch up a few times when different directors are involved and stuff. And it's really good because, you know, it keeps you kind of like interested in like different episodes, different feels. So you're kind of able to like, you know, different rise them, you know what I mean? Like, and pick out like, you know, your favorites, which is always like cool to do with like a TV show season and stuff. And yeah, so just like, you know, this season takes a lot of like risks creatively, which I liked. You know, as dark as the show has gotten, and like, you know, like visual, like how, you know, visually powerful it can be this season, definitely goes for it the most out of any season, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of great, you know, storylines this season and stuff. So yeah, I mean, Kevin's basically touched upon some things. So I'm just kind of trying to like add to it. So yeah, what do you want to talk about next?
All right. Well, you said a lot more than I expected you to say, but going back to what you said, the other characters this season are so well written as well, especially when it comes to Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter, because this was kind of a tricky dynamic. This is, of course, the first season in which these two are no longer together. Diane's gone her own path. Mr. Peanut Butter's gone his own path. But that does not at all shake up their characters. Like it takes them in a direction that we truly have not seen before. And it really explores this new territory for the show that I really did love a lot, especially when it comes to the Diane character. There is a fantastic episode with her where we really do get into her realizing that, holy shit, this is it. You know, she's not going to be with Mr. Peanut Butter anymore, and those quote-unquote dog days are kind of over. She now has to move on and navigate through life on her own, and I really love the way they were able to do that. But like we said, the characters are so well written. There's a lot of great arcs going on this season. But the other thing I think this season did really well, more than others, is the social commentary that's going on, because this season is shockingly relevant. And I say shockingly because this season was written way before any of the sexual misconduct.
I don't believe that, honestly. Like I just to kind of like get into that quickly, because we can have a conversation with this. I just want to like say this quickly. I don't mean to interrupt you, but like I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. Like the commentary here, like Kevin's about to say, is very well done. But honestly, I don't believe that it was written before the Me Too movement happened, because it just feels too relevant. And like I don't know, it just feels too coincidental. You know what I mean?
Well, Raphael Bob-Waksberg actually touched upon that, and he said, like, this was all still going on at the time. It just wasn't as, like, blatant as it was really now. Like, this is stuff that people knew for years in Hollywood, but no one really ever, like, it didn't really come to fruition until, you know, just recently.
That's true.
Either way, yeah, what this season did an incredible job with is really diving into the pure, you know, state of Hollywood right now, and how just kind of nightmarish of a business it really is. I mean, their season really delves into a lot of sexual misconduct things, but it also delves into the idea of, wanting to become relevant, but not for just being a victim. You don't want to be a victim. You want to be remembered for something talent-wise, and they do a really great job of that overall. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I really love the social commentary of this season. It's so spot on. It never feels like they are preaching to you. It's not once they really do a good job, I think, of presenting both sides and really getting you into, this is how this side feels, this is how this side feels. They do a really great job with that overall. And the way that eventually actually correlates with this season's theme, which, like I said, is all about trying to finally change something and accepting our flaws and really trying to do something about it. I think it really did that in a brilliant way, and I really love the way they were able to do that. Also, like Kane was saying, the one-off episodes continue to dominate this show, and more so than ever. Almost every episode this season is a one-off. There's rarely an episode where there isn't some sort of unconventional story going on. There's an episode where, like I said, it's just Diane and us getting into what she's really been up to since her divorce with Mr. Peanut Butter. There's an episode with Mr. Peanut Butter where we see him go to all these different Halloween parties, and we see how each time, he's had this relationship and it's gone to shits, and that, there's one common denominator through each one of these interactions. We really get into that. There is an entire episode this season, which is literally just Bojack giving a eulogy for his mother, and it is some of the most powerful work this show has ever done. There's even an episode where we focus on two characters that aren't main characters, and they're literally just telling their version of a story and changing up the names and the characters. And it's just so brilliant the way they would do this. A normal show, a show that's not, a regular show, a show that's not this well written, an average show, they would not tell stories in the way that this show really does. The show just finds so many creative and different ways to tell these stories, and it honestly astounds me. Like, I know we're 5 seasons in and this should be something I'm used to, but I just can't help but just be so immersed with what they're able to do and be I'm just so impressed with how creative these writers really are and how they're able to do these different things. You would think by now they're at the point where they're running out of ideas, but even I'd say they're more creative than ever, honestly. Like, they really do give you a lot of new stuff in terms of the, like I said, creative standpoint. And I think they did a phenomenal job with that. There's even some different animation stuff this season. I mean, it's just phenomenal. I really loved what they were able to do with that. And so I think writing-wise, the show is still so on point, more than it's ever been. And so they did a really great job of that. Animation, like I said, is still fantastic, as it always is. There's still stuff in the background that if you blink and you miss it, you will miss a really great joke. There are a lot of great jokes this season. And that's the thing. Like, as dark as the season is, it doesn't take away from the comedy. The comedy is still fantastic. There is this great recurring gag with Todd and this eventual robot that he builds. And it is some of the best stuff we have ever seen with Todd as a character, easily. I love what they end up doing with this robot. It does not go in the direction you think it's going to, and I loved every second of it. I thought it was probably some of the most hysterical stuff this show has ever done, and I really did love that. The score as well is always fantastic, and the editing. Every episode, is very well paced. There was never an episode for me that felt too slow. There was never an episode that I was bored with. I think every episode this season, similar to most seasons, has a place in this season. There is an episode here where you're watching, you're like, oh, that feels out of place, or oh, that could have been cut out. There's not a weird, like, one-off episode like in Stranger Things season 2. There's not something like that here, because almost every episode is a one-off. That's kind of becoming the, that's kind of becoming the status quo for this show, and I think they just done such an incredible job with that, and I really did love everything about the editing. Before we do delve into the spoilers and everything like that, we are going to turn it over to Mr. Fish himself and ask how he feels about all this technical stuff.
This is probably like my favorite, like, at least like pace season, because it keeps like going and there's so much like happening, and it's like, there really isn't like any like filler. Like, obviously, like, there's like, jokes here and there and like extra like side characters involved and stuff, but like this is a very like well, like, written, like I said, an edited season. It's constantly going, and it's That's why it's so engaging, and that's why I was able to, you know, finish it so quickly. And that's why I think it's probably like, you know, like my favorite season so far, because it's the most compelling, it's so fast paced, and it's a really interesting season. And you know, and something else that like we didn't even really touch on is that Princess like Carolyn also probably grows a lot this season. You know, there's even an episode, there's even a centric episode about her that I thought was very interesting. We learn about some of her past and how, you know, she's kind of damaged a little bit because of it. You know, and how she wants to be a mother, and you know, her getting over, you know, her relationship problems in the past. It's very, very interesting. And you know, and the stuff with Todd is as funny as usual, and you know, he's getting into, you know, his, you know, scenarios, and there's this, you know, sex robot. It's very interesting. So yeah, but like I said, all the characters have something to do. This is just a really, really well produced season.
All right. So now that we've really talked about all of the technical stuff, now we really are going to delve into spoilers, which this will probably be quite long because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot really does go down in the season. So we're just going to jump into it. I think the first thing to talk about, because this is really when everything starts to go to shit, is, of course, the return of Anna Spadakofika. It's one of those things where you're watching the season and you know something is going to go down, but at the same time, things are going well for Bojack. Good. He's bonding well with Gina. He's on good terms with a lot of his relationships. And you kind of are just hoping that things are going to go well for him. And then Diane gets into the car with Anna Spadakofika, and she reveals to her that tape that I honestly forgot about. I forgot this happened in season 3. I forgot that Bojack did, in fact, end up sharing this with her. But it is a tape that does reveal of the whole incident on the boat between him and Penny, and now Diane knows about it. And this takes the show into a whole new direction because, again, it's one of those things where you feel like the show and Bojack himself had kind of put that on the back burner, and they intentionally make you believe that it's not as much of an issue anymore. They intentionally make you think that Bojack has grown past it when you see that is absolutely not the case at all. Mind you, this is one of those things that not a lot of people know about. There are only a few select individuals that actually know about this incident, and Diane is not one of them. And for them to move Diane into this direction, I think is one of the best decisions this season has made for sure, because Diane really goes so far with this, much farther than you expect, going as far as to literally implement changes into the script so that way Bojack, she can get that confession out of him, and that way she can finally see what's actually going on here, because throughout the whole season, she's like, we have to have this conversation, but he just keeps ignoring her. He doesn't really want to accept what actually happened. He wants to try to move past it and, again, pretend like it never happened. And I think that conversation, like I said, you know, when she starts to add things into the script, that's really when things start to go off the wall. And from there, things just get insane. And I really loved how well written that truly was, because, again, Diane is in a much different place this season. She's not with Mr. Peanut Butter. She's a lot more unhinged, and she's not taking as much shit as she usually does. Diane usually doesn't take shit, but even less so this season. Like, because Mr. Peanut Butter's not in her life, she has even less of a reason to care. Like, she wants to get to the bottom of things. She wants to know what's going on here, and she will not rest until she does get those answers. And I really love that direction they did take Diane into this season. I think Diane really kind of becomes she brings this side to Bojack that we haven't really seen before, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I just want to go to Kaden here. What did you think of this big reveal when Anna played her that tape and things like that?
I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Because I didn't expect the season to you know, bring that back up. Because like I was kind of like, after season 3, I was like, okay, I maybe they're gonna put this to rest, but kind of like move past it. But it makes a lot of sense, because this whole season, Diane is really upset with Bojack because, you know, like he's trying to change, but like he's doing a very, you know, like flawed job at doing that. So you know, it works for her to find out about what happened, and then her implementing that stuff into like the script and stuff. I was kind of like, that's kind of, you know, like messed up of her to do, but honestly, it makes sense, because Bojack is not going to change unless he feels uncomfortable. He just isn't. He's that type of guy, and I think Diane is the only person that is willing to challenge him and does that. And that whole conversation in episode 10 at the premiere, you know, like at first again, I was like, that's kind of messed up of her to like, you know, just confront him about fucking everything there. But honestly, Bojack would not have confessed to anything if he wasn't, you know, like uncomfortable like that. And with Diane, that's someone that like he like has like it feels the need he has to make sure that he keeps that relationship, you know, alive because he has such a strong connection to her. And it, you know, it's just a very interesting, you know, conflict. And I'm happy that it was brought up again because I did kind of one of my like smallish issues with season 3 is I kind of like the whole thing with Penny was a little bit like it's obviously brought up in season 3 of course, but like I wish that there was a little bit more to it, there's a little bit more meat to chew, and that it happens here. You know, and I feel like that this should finally this part of the story should conclude in season 6. I hope that happens and stuff like, and like I probably won't happen, like it would maybe probably not to make most sense, like, you know, thematically, but I hope there's like at least some way Bojack will be able to get in contact with Penny again without, you know, freaking out and stuff. You know, and just like, you know, for him to like apologize and stuff because that whole situation was, you know, obviously did not go that well, of course. And yeah, and I just love you know, just how this dynamic between Bojack and Diane has become. It's the realist of the show. It's not afraid to go places, and you can really tell that. So I really like how intense this is. And honestly, you know, Bojack realizes at the end of the season he needs to change because of all that's happened. But you know, what does happen after episode 10 and episode 11 is, in my opinion, like the darkest episode of the show. That's my favorite episode of the season because Bojack just goes down like this like huge drug high, and you can tell in episode 9 when his sister is like to him like do you even need the drugs for your back? And he doesn't. He's clearly addicted to them. You know, and you know, I wasn't expecting the show to now talk about opioid addiction and stuff. And episode 11 is like this whole crazy drugged out episode where like it crosses between Filbert in real life and Bojack's now getting confused. And there's this really interesting thing with like a flyer for the show, like a storyline where we find out that you know, the show Filbert, you know, killed his partner and stuff. So like, you know, someone knows about it or whatever, and like he like makes this letter, but Bojack thinks it's like a you know, it's something for him in real life and just all this stuff, and that like they know about what he did with Penny and just all this, and like he thinks it's Diane. It's crazy, and like he's just having like a drug trip basically, and he's basically mentally like going insane. And I related to it so much because I've had that happen to me, and it's the scariest thing because you're not yourself. You don't know what to do. I think people. Look, I'm not trying to be like an asshole, you don't get it, but I think people who haven't gone for something like this, they wouldn't understand as much just how terrifying it is to have something like mess up your mind that much, and you have no like sense of like reality. And it captured it so well. That's why the episode was so all over the place, because it had no sense of reality, because when you're in that type of situation, you're gonna have no sense of reality. And episode 11 goes to some, especially the ending, which I think might just be next to Sarah Lynn overdosing, like the darkest moment in the whole show, which Kevin could touch upon. Like, I'll just say, like, for now, that I was shocked that it went that far, and it was handled in such an unapologetic and just like brutal way. And the fact that it was like the last like minute of the episode just cuts to black, I was like, oh my god. But yeah, I mean, episode 11 for me is maybe like my favorite episode of the show, because I feel like it's the most realistic to how Bojack is, what he's going through. He's such a damaged character, and you really see it here. And also, I gotta say, that musical number in the episode was pretty well done. So yeah. And my favorite part though in episode 11 is I love how like that float of him as Filbert and at the premiere, and how like Diane accidentally cuts it away. It keeps like reappearing in his mind for episode 11, and I love the shot. My favorite shot this season is when he keeps like seeing like those stairs, which, you know, might be like to go to heaven or something. He goes up them, and all it is just a float of him. And like to me, like that, you can interpret that any way. You can interpret it as like a metaphor for him, like finally, you know, like seeing himself and realize,
yeah, that's how I saw it.
Yeah, like both ways. I don't know. You can interpret it as ever you want to, but I just thought that it was like a very powerful moment and a very powerful, like, you know, imagery or whatever. So yeah, Kevin, you can touch on episode 11 now, because I hold on.
All right, so let's back up for a little bit, as you were touching upon. So Bojack ends up having this very fatal injury. It's a near-death experience.
Oh, I forgot to talk about that. Yeah.
Basically, he is put on opioids, and, you know, he has a very bad back throughout the rest of the season. And this was a very interesting.
Okay. To be fair, he was on them already throughout the rest of the season, but then they got like worse because of his like accident.
Yeah. And this is a very interesting move because the whole thing is actually done at first as like a joke. Princess Carolyn is out of town. He's like hurt or whatever, and she doesn't really want to, do anything. She is trying to this season, she's trying to adopt a child, and she's more concerned about that. They kind of passed it off as, oh, Bojack's hurt, it's gonna be fine. And that's something the show just does so well. They pass something off as a joke and then eventually make it a serious issue. And you don't think that they're going to go as deep into Bojack's addiction as they really do, but it makes a lot of sense. And to me, I saw it less as him getting addicted and more as him trying to use it not just as pain reliever, but also pain reliever for the emotional pain that was going on in his life as well. He was using this as a way to kind of alleviate stress. And I think through that, he actually did get very addicted to what was going on, and from there things just get extremely dark, especially the confrontation with Hollyhock and things like that, where what was interesting about the season is you think Hollyhock would be a major part of it because everything that happened in season 4. She's actually not in the season that much, of course, and I thought that was a good decision because we expect her to be in it a lot. We expect for her to really be there, but it made sense because she's off at college and she does come out this one time, and basically they have this really great scene where she, talks about how she loves him and things like that, and she doesn't want him to go through this, but he's just too far gone at this point. He's focused on the opioids. He's not really focused on anything else. He starts lashing out at people. He starts to become a lot angrier, more than we've ever seen Bojack, arguably even more than when he was like, an alcoholic and things like that, way more aggressive than he's ever been. He actually does get into a very serious car accident because of this. And that moment was, holy shit. I mean, I was not expecting them to go there at all. My jaw was on the floor when they went there. I had to rewatch it several times just to see like what was actually happening before, just because it was so shocking. And it's such a brilliant move for the show because now he's got a broken arm. But at the same time, he's got this dynamic going on with Gina. And I really loved everything about the dynamic between Bojack and Gina because Gina is the first relationship with Bojack that feels healthy. It's the first relationship that feels like he is not going to screw this up. He is fixing quite a few things. There's a lot of things that the old Bojack would have done, but he doesn't decide to do with Gina. Gina confesses to him in episode 3 that she is this she wanted to be this Broadway performer, and it was always a dream of hers. And, he gets her to sing, but it turns out she actually can't sing very well at all. And at first, while she's humiliated by this, she admits that this was kind of a good experience for her because it makes her realize that, she wasn't able to, that she realized that, she finally got that answer of will it happen or not. She realized that it's not going to happen to her, but she is still involved in Filbert. And when Bojack and Gina, they stop seeing each other, there's that moment where he's very adamant on finding the opioids and he lets Gina on, and Gina thinks that he wants to have a more serious relationship. And while I do think that Bojack genuinely did care about Gina on an emotional level, obviously he wasn't trying to confess that to her. They end up in this way deeper into this relationship than you would expect them to. Basically they start going out in a serious way. She starts asking if, he wants to, he wants this to be a public thing, and he's saying it's not. And then, of course, we do get to the premiere of Filbert overall. And this is really when things start to completely hit the fan. Because like I said, Diane's not taking any shit. She really wants to get to the bottom of things. And she doesn't want him to just try to hide this from her anymore. Throughout the whole season, these two are really not in the best place at all. There's so many times where she wants him to open up and she's just frustrated that he's not. And this is when she finally lets it all out. And she realized that we realize as well that all of us have kind of misjudged Bojack and actually the way that we are supposed to view him, because up to this point, the show has portrayed Bojack not necessarily as a sympathetic guy, but someone that you're supposed to feel for and someone you're supposed to root for. And Diane really lays out this narrative that there really are no good guys or bad guys in the world. There are people who are, there are people, and sometimes they do good and sometimes they do bad. And I don't think that anything that is underlined any more than this scene with Bojack and Diane, where he basically thought that because of the memoir that she wrote, that she wanted him to think that everything was okay with the way he was and that he just needed to be fine with it, when that is not at all what she really wanted. She wanted him to finally realize the error of his ways. And there's this great scene where you think this is going to be it. You know, you guys know in the show, when a character says, fuck you, that's it. There's no going back on that. You know, Todd said it. Charlotte said it. You know, Herb Kazaz said it before he died. Anytime someone uses the word fuck on this show, it's basically the end. There's no coming back from that. So you think she's going to do that, and she doesn't. And you see that she does decide to kind of distance herself from Bojack, letting that Bojack balloon in the air, basically letting it free, but also letting herself of Bojack as well. And it's a very powerful moment. You see really how Diane really feels. You see that while she does care about Bojack and she really does want him to get the help, she's starting to become a little hopeless. She's starting to think that maybe he isn't ever going to get it, ever get through his head. And it's not really till that one confrontation when I think we really start to see how Diane truly does feel about Bojack, and her true feelings really do come out, and you know what she really does want him to do. And I really loved everything about that scene. And then of course, yes, episode 11 continues the tradition of the penultimate episode just being the magnum opus of the season, and that is very much that is very that is definitely no exception here. And for a while, it was hard to top. You know, that 6th episode where Bojack gives that eulogy about his mother. It's really powerful stuff, of course, you know, where he's talking. And even with that as well, you know, going back to the whole Bojack not wanting to open up about things, you know, his mother dies and you think, okay, Bojack's finally laid it all out. But things, again, are just backfiring for him when he realizes that in a heartbreaking scene that it's not even the right funeral parlor. He's just that far gone that he didn't even go to the right funeral parlor. And because of that, he just confessed everything he felt about his mother and every single thing, you know, the anguish and the deep resentment that she had for him. He's confessed to everyone, to a complete group of strangers. And I think it's just such a powerful moment. And like I said, it was an episode that seemed very hard to top, but episode 11 absolutely did. What this episode just does so well is it really gives you this idea of getting into Bojack's head. It's kind of like taken up to a much bigger level than I think that episode even was, because Downer Ending really was the first time we got a deeper look at Bojack and what he really did in life. And this episode really is kind of like the culmination of all of those penultimate episodes that we've gotten. It gives us a little bit of, you know, Bojack tripping and things like that. But this episode, he's even farther gone. He can't seem to distinguish the difference between what's on his TV show and what's in real life. There are many points in this episode where he thinks he's on Filbert. He thinks he's in the show, but no, it's happening in real life, or vice versa, where you think that what's going on in real life, but it turns out to actually be on Filbert. It's a very effective device in that way, because it really makes us realize that Bojack is losing grip on his reality. He doesn't, he's starting to forget, you know, what's actually real and what's actually happening in that given moment. And it's very startling to think about, but at the same time, again, it really does show you everything, you know, every terrible thing that Bojack has done is really brought up in this episode. There's that fantastic musical number with Gina where she talks about how life is really just one endless show, and how there's always different things happening. And if, you know, if the chaos would stop, then it would be boring and that it wouldn't be interesting. Where I think that's very much the case for Bojack, where, you know, even when things are going well for him, just something else has to happen where it's just his life is no longer boring in that sense. You know, his life is just always filled with tons of chaos, and nothing gets darker than the last 5 minutes of this episode, which were absolutely soul crushing. I mean, I did not think that they could go farther than Sarah Lynn dying. I did not think that they could go farther than what we got on even the last year's penultimate episode, with us getting a very harrowing look at what his mother had to go through and all of that. But we get it here. Bojack and Gina have this really big fight where basically she realizes his opioid addiction. She realizes she needs to do something about it, and he's not having it. He needs his opioids. He goes as far as to like start breaking things. He puts like a hole in the wall, and you're really worried that something bad is going to happen to Gina. And Then we get to the scene where we thought that it was Filbert that we were watching. It turns out, no, this was actually happening concurrently. You know, he's shooting for the second season of Filbert. And of course, in that moment, he is strangling Gina. And even after Flip calls cut, he doesn't let go. He keeps strangling her almost to near death. And I genuinely thought that they were going to kill her off. I really thought that they were going to take it in that direction. And I'm glad they didn't, because in many ways, people have said this, Bojack very much did kill Sarah Lynn. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't really try to do anything about it. If anything, he encouraged her addiction because she was away from it for a while. And he was the one who really got her back into drugs and really sent her down that down spiral again. And I was really worried they were going to do that with Gina. They would kind of be, oh, Bojack's going to kill Gina. And then the rest of the season is him trying to get over that. But what they end up doing, I think, is inherently more interesting. Gina is alive, but she wants nothing to do with Bojack after this, obviously. And that really does take us into the finale. But I think, you know, Caden, you will agree. I read a very interesting article from Bob-Waksberg where he talks about how they're always asking the question in the show is there anything they can do to make Bojack completely irredeemable? Is there ever a way to turn him around? And I think if there's one thing the season shows is that even if Bojack does get the help, there's no coming back from this. This is something that he will always remember. This is something that will always be, he's not going to be able to put this in the back of his head like he has with the other stuff. This is something he really is always going to think about, and I don't think there is ever any coming back from this. It's devastating to think about, but that's just simply the case. You know, he was, obviously he wouldn't do this if he wasn't addicted, but it's just that moment that he unfortunately is never going to be able to come back from. And I just really do applaud the show for going there. A lot of shows would try to gloss over this and they wouldn't make a big deal out of it, but this show really went for it. And I just really loved how deep into his addiction we really did get. Yes, it was very scary. Yes, it was something that was very uncomfortable to watch, but it really is a very harrowing portrayal of someone on opioid addiction. I think they handled it perfectly here, much better than most shows do. And I really loved everything about that. I know you said pretty much everything you want to say, but is there anything else you want to reiterate when it comes to that final scene?
Yeah, I was shocked that he was like strangled Gina as long as he did, and I was frightened. I was like, are they gonna like go that like are they gonna go even farther than already had? And you know, just the ending was just like heartbreaking because I'm like, damn, Bojack, like I don't know how he's gonna come back from this. Like I honestly thought that he might be like arrested or something. I don't even know, dude. And you know, the finale, you know, he just like I love I'll just skip to like the ending. He needed to go to rehab because there's no other way. He can't change like unless he has someone like Diane by his side, and he needs those 6 weeks to just try to get better and learn strategies to help him change because you know it's out there now, and he had to do the interview and everything, and it was just sad to see like a person like you know, like obviously I guess it's like a horse in the show, who even knows, but like you know, like it was just sad to see like a living thing going through emotions like this, you know, because like no one deserves that, but like everyone can change if they get the right help, and Bojack really hasn't, and Diane's the only one that really will. So you know, I think it's a great place for the character to go. Obviously like the whole strangling thing, but like go to rehab because like this real if he didn't, then Bojack is basically just done. Like there's nothing he can do. So I'm very interested in seeing how season 6 is. Like him trying to maybe like correct those things and just apologizing, you know. So and maybe maturing. We'll see. So yeah. But yeah. Definitely. I think Bojack this season just he goes through a lot. And you just really finally, like, deeply get how damaged he is. He's probably the most damaged character I've seen in, like, any, like, form of entertainment, honestly. He's just so, to be honest, fucked up. He basically is. So, yeah, and, you know, he's just a very well-written character that challenges the audience and challenges himself, and it's really well done. And the other characters are going through shit too. You haven't even touched on the fact how Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane hook up.
I was gonna get into that after.
Yeah, that which to be honest is like one of my other problems. I wasn't really too crazy about how that whole thing was handled. Like I I understand in some like situations that could happen in real life. I heard it has happened in real life, but like I don't think it worked like overall in the season. Like I don't. I think it was just put in there to cause extra conflict, and it didn't really come across as like something that like needed to happen to further like the characters along. Like I think the relationship is pretty much done. I don't think they needed to reassure it by having sex 2 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I thought the whole scene where Mr. Peanut Butter was like think that they were gonna like get together again. It's like I understand he's literally a dog, but like you don't just treat him like a goddamn idiot the whole time. You know what I mean?
Also, like we see that he still cares for her, but for her, like she didn't even want to get back together. She clearly just did this because she was in a bad place and he was there, and she needed that connection in that way.
Yeah, but it just. Why that? Like, why did it have to be that? It just, it didn't need to happen, in my opinion. But that's just me, you know. So.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. Looking back, it's definitely not the best place to go. However, going back to Mr. Peanut Butter's storyline, I actually really did like the storyline between him and Pickles. How Pickles is
I like that too.
Perfect, the perfect woman for him. Honestly, she's the first woman who really isn't that deeply affected by this Halloween party. He actually is trying to move forward with her and realizing the error of his ways, that every single woman he wants to be better than the last. And you see, while the other ones were like, let's get out of here, Pickles actually wants to do something about it. She wants to support the show more, even if she doesn't really like the show. In fact, she goes as far as to say she hates Filbert, the show that he's on. She is trying to, she's trying to just really accept him for who he is. And you think things are going to go really well. So when he goes back to Diane, it is kind of devastating, because you were hoping that maybe him and Pickles would start something and they get into a serious relationship. And he does propose to her at the end of this episode, but that's not going to go anywhere. That the wedding is going to go horribly wrong. If you don't think that, then you don't know this show. So yeah, it is a strange development looking back. I will definitely say that. In terms of flaws for this season, I really only that definitely is a glaring flaw for sure. It's something I really didn't think about until you said it. But in terms of flaws, my only real flaw with this season is the character of Todd. I know a lot of people like this character. I really like him as well. But for me, he is the weakest character on this show. And it's mainly because every single time it seems like he's going into some sort of emotional place, the show just reverts back to the comedy. And look, he's hysterical. The whole gag with the sex robot and him becoming this like Harvey Weinstein type figure that literally ends up bringing the whole fucking company down and shutting production on Filbert. That's fantastic. Like, I love that social commentary there. It's really great. But I will admit that I was interested in seeing them get into the whole aspect of him being asexual. Can he maintain this relationship with Yolanda? And it just didn't really go anywhere after that 3rd episode. I wish we could have gotten just a little bit more with that, and we just simply didn't. Again, I like what Todd did this season, but I just wish we would have gotten just a little bit more. And maybe it's just me asking for too much, but I personally really loved in season 3 how Todd had this really great emotional arc with Bojack, with him and Emily, and how Emily was like, his childhood crush, and Bojack kind of, he very much went against him in that way, and he kind of betrayed him. I really love that emotional arc, and since then, we have yet to have a Todd arc that really does live up to the emotional highs of that. I'm hoping that season 6 can give us something like that, because when you give Todd serious material, it can work very well. And I really do love, the fun Todd who's like always making inventions that go horribly wrong. But at this point, I do want to see just a little bit more emotional stuff there. But other than that, there's really not too many flaws. Like we said, Princess Carolyn is like a really great arc with her trying to adopt this baby. And even with that, we get into more of her past, seeing that, how she had a miscarriage when she was young. And not only did this go horrible for her, but her mother was completely against this. She pretty much, was very sort of emotionally abusive towards her. They had a very awful relationship. And what she thought turned out to be this priceless family heirloom actually turns out to be this like just normal piece of jewelry, which I thought was just very effective. A lot of great stuff going on there. Like we said, a really great storyline for Diane this season. And the place that she goes, a lot of people are talking about this final scene. And I'm just going to say right now, I think a lot of people are overthinking this. No, she's not going to end up like Princess Diana. The reason they did that is because it was funny in the context of the show. I don't think that she's going to end up like Princess Diana. I don't think they're going to kill her off. I think Diane is there because she's the person who's going to have a healthy relationship with Bojack, and she's the person that genuinely is going to push him forward as a character. And I think all that final scene is really showing is that his process should take longer than expected. If you notice, like the season and the weather changes and things like that. So I got the sense that his process is just taking a little bit longer, and she's going to have to be on her own for a little bit. And I don't know. We'll have to see. But I do not think that they're going to kill her off. It would not make sense narratively, and honestly would be just a bit of a cop-out. I would honestly be really upset if they end up going there, because I think Diane, especially this season, is probably one of my favorite characters, and I think she's very important in the show. I think the Bojack and Diane relationship has really become the focal point of this show, and if they were to somehow, compromise that with some really cheap death, I would be very, very upset, and I don't think they're going to. So I know there's fan theories, but I'm just going to debunk that real quick. I don't think they're going to do that. Other than that, though, this season is absolutely fantastic. Going back to what you said with the finale, the thing that really sticks with me in this finale, not only is Bojack legitimately trying to get help and legitimately feeling sorrow for what he did, because it's not like he hasn't before, but he really wants to do something about it. It's not like season 3 where he just didn't know how to handle Sarah Lynn's death and he didn't know how to process it. He was very self-destructive, going as far as to kill himself. Now, yeah, he feels bad for what he did to Gina, but he knows that he needs to get help and he doesn't want to wait any longer. There's that brilliant scene with Gina where she talks about how, she doesn't want to be remembered as just the victim of Bojack. And again, I think that really does ring true for today's climate in Hollywood. Tons of women are coming forward, and lately that's all they're famous for. They're famous because they were brave and they came forward, and sure, that's great, but their talent is really, at the end of the day, we have to remember that these are celebrities and they want to be recognized for their craft and for their talent. And Gina is very much like that. She doesn't want to just be someone who was abused by Bojack. She wants to be recognized for her talent in this show, and I think it's just such a pivotal moment for this character, and I think it was a really great way to close her out. I really love the way that was done. I probably is the last scene with her because, she tells Bojack, I want nothing to do with you after this. I'll be civil to you on set, but there's no coming back from this. I don't want anything to do with you again. So yeah, I do think it was a very good way to end her character. I know I'm rambling now, but just to sum it up, yes, this was a very good finale. It was a great finale about moving forward and development. And like you, yeah, I do think next season is probably going to be the last. I don't really know where else the show can go from here. Then again, I thought this season was going to be now, but I genuinely do think based on where the season ends, I kind of want it to end. I think it's the best time to really start wrapping things up. See if Bojack is able to legitimately help himself, if he's legitimately able to turn things around. Can he have a healthy sort of friendship with Diane? Because she did regard him as his best friend now. So that that's legit. That she does care about him. And that she definitely is going to, she's definitely going to support him when he comes out of this. But how is he going to come out of this? He's going to be a changed person. I think that's going to be very interesting. And now Princess Carolyn has a baby now, so she's really moving forward as a character. Mr. Peanut Butter is starting to realize that he still cares for Diane, but then there's Pickles as well. So where's that going to go? I mean, there's a lot of places the show can really go in season 6. And I'm really hoping they take all the opportunities possible. Knowing the show, they absolutely will. But like I said, I'm very interested to see where they go in season 6. Now, this season went in so many surprising directions that I really wasn't expecting. And at the end of the day, I'm much happier that they decided to go for a much more surprising story than the one we expected, just because it turned out to be much more effective and emotional and really did change our stance on a lot of things in the show that we didn't even really realize about. And I think they did such an incredible job with that overall. But again, I'm rambling. Let's just go back to Caden for his final thoughts on the season.
So yeah, Yeah, there's definitely a lot that's going to happen next season. Like I said, I think next season will be the last season. So yeah, I'm interested in that. Like I said, there's definitely new things about everyone's basically going to, I think, be wrapping up basically and just like including and finally figure out who they all are as characters because they're all kind of going through stuff right now and like trying to figure out who they are. You know, Bojack, obviously, Diane, you know, just trying to figure out, you know, what she's going to go for, like what's her future. Christmas Caroline's a mother, you know, producing Mr. Peanut Butter, you know, how to be happy in the top of his, you know, asexuality and this and that. So, which also, by the way, just touch on that. I liked how they handled the whole like asexual thing and like the app and stuff. I thought it was like, I like how they explored it more this season. Definitely, just to touch on that quickly.
Oh yeah, they definitely did a good job with it. I just wish they would have maybe done just a teeny bit more with it.
Yeah.
Just because, like I said, I thought the arc in season 3 was so strong that I was really hoping this would be able to kind of echo that, and I'm hoping season 6 finally gives us that, you know, really well handled asexual storyline for Todd that I think we all really want to see.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, besides Bojack, I'm really interested in seeing how Princess Carolyn is because, you know, she's wanted to be a mom since she was like, you know, 17, so it's like
I forgot to say, going back to how Bojack was like lashing out at others, the line between him and Princess Carolyn where he basically tells her that she'll never be a mother and that this is why she's not a mother and things like that. You know, the way that she was able to kind of brush that aside and things like that, I think that just shows that she is legitimately getting better as a person. Yes, she is kind of downplaying what he did, but she's trying to be as delicate as she really can. And she's trying to move in a much more positive direction. And seeing what Princess Carolyn has been through, it's great to see. I really love seeing her progress as a character. And I think out of all the characters this season, she really is the one, besides Bojack, of course, that really has moved forward the most.
Sorry, I was drinking water. Okay. So yeah.
But you're a fish. You're in water.
That's true.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, you know, I think basically we've said enough. The only other thing I want to touch on is episode 6 because that's like the most popular episode of the season, and I love that episode. I truly the thing with his mother, it was also touched on in season 4, which was my favorite part of season 4. But you know, with this season, it was just the whole funeral and eulogy. Like I felt so bad for Bojack because he wanted to love his mother so much, and he just was such like a loving and caring, you know, individual. But he was just broken by his like family. And it's so
especially that part of the episode where he talks about Becker and how, you know, it's a show that even though he didn't really like it all that much, he just knew how much better it could have been, and how he wishes that him and his mother's relationship, you know, was better like that. It was very effective in that sense.
Yep.
Very good job with that. It was a very good way, I think, of wrapping up that arc overall.
Yeah, it definitely was. So yeah, man. This season, back to episode 6. Yeah, I loved it. I thought that it was extremely well written, and honestly, it was like an Emmy quality written episode. So, which is something I barely say. So, yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think we should probably try to, wrap this up. So, yeah. Anyways, so I guess I'll wrap my things up first. So yeah, this is, I think, my favorite season. This is the season I was most invested. I think it was the best written. It flew by so much. It was just so compelling. It's so interesting, and it just brought so much more to these characters than you thought could be there. I'm extremely excited for season 6, and I absolutely love the show. There's a reason why it's one of the few shows I watch, and yes, I can't wait. I'm gonna give this season overall a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, so going back to what I said, I'm going to reiterate a lot of stuff, but this was a phenomenal season that really did subvert a lot of expectations, but in a way that I think was honestly really warranted. It dissected the character of Bojack in a way that they really haven't before. It presented a lot of interesting things, especially with Diane and things like that. It brought back a lot of things were kind of put on the back burner and really just ushers in this really interesting story for season 6, which is kind of uncharted territory. Filbert is kind of done now. He's in rehab. There isn't going to be any upcoming project that he's working on. So that's really different. So I'm interested in seeing really where that's going to go overall. But like we said, this is such a phenomenal season. It's definitely one of the best seasons the show has ever given us. Despite those few flaws here and there, this is a near perfect season of the show. It continues to be one of the most accurate depictions of mental illness on TV. Yep. Also, just one of the most well-written shows we have right now. It is shockingly relevant. It's very emotional. It's also hysterically funny at points. And it's very rare that you can combine all those things together and have it flow as well as this show truly does. But still, in season 5, they're just continuing to deepen the layers and, you know, give us things that we just haven't seen before. And I'm just, again, I'm constantly impressed with how, you know, how creative these writers truly are and how they're able to keep things so interesting for 5 seasons now. And that's why I truly hope that season 6 is in fact the last, because I think the show is moving in a very good direction. I do think it is coming to its end point for sure. This is a phenomenal season of TV that continues to show why this is the best show that Netflix currently has going on. And I'm absolutely going to give season 5 of Bojack Horseman an A. All right, so with that, guys, we pretty much said all we need to say about season 5. I know this dragged on for a while, but there was a lot to get into. A lot really did happen this season, and there were a lot of things that we really wanted to touch upon. I want to thank Auburn Wanderer, of course, for joining me. I know, you know, he's trapped in his bowl, and he doesn't really have a lot to do except swim around. But
yeah, it's kind of lonely.
Yeah, he needed to come out. You know, he needed some time to really interact with people. He doesn't get to do a lot of social interaction swimming around there. So it's great to have you on, of course. Either way, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this season overall. Left your thoughts in it. Where do you think the show is going? What you like? What you dislike? All that kind of stuff. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.